and hanging out with me today. I'm excited to hang out with Mike and Charles, and we are going to get things rolling. So as many of you are aware, we're jumping in again to compliance today. Mike and Charles are standing in for Chris, who was unable to make it due to a family emergency. So Mike, Charles, thank you so much for taking the time out today. And really, this is a joint effort webinar with BRITECITY and AppRiver Zix, who is a partner of ours. And many of you who are BRITECITY clients have been utilizing some of their services, especially around the area of security, for years and years and years, even if you're not fully aware of it. So it's really fun to see their product stack and their expertise grow, and in turn allows us as a partner to provide those services back to you as our clients. So now, for those of you not joining, a little bit about BRITECITY. BRITECITY is or for those of you not, I'm sorry, not a BRITECITY client. BRITECITY and AppRiver are, BRITECITY is an outsourced IT service provider located in Southern California. We provide outsourced IT for small to medium-sized businesses who either don't have an IT staff or need some complementary assistance. Maybe they have full-time IT, but they're looking for additional expertise or assistance with more than they can handle on their own. So we step in and provide that as a service. We've been in business since 2007. We're supporting approximately 180 firms here in Southern California and continuing to grow and having a great time. So we are a premium or platinum partner with Zix AppRiver, and we've been working with them now for 10 years. So this has been a fantastic relationship, and I'm excited to have Mike share a little bit about AppRiver Zix in more detail, and then kind of take it away from a client's compliance perspective. So Mike, I'll hand the microphone over to you. Welcome today.
Thanks a lot, Chad. Pleasure to be here, and welcome everybody. So just a bit of background on Zix AppRiver to give you a bit of context. If you were to look back beyond a decade, we were two separate companies with almost somewhat different visions. Zix was really focused on bringing email security and email encryption to some of the more security conscious organizations in the world. And AppRiver was bringing email hosting and eventually products like Microsoft Office 365 to those same organizations. And about 2 years ago, we came together through a formal acquisition and really united our efforts around a holistic solution suite of protecting and offering email services. So security, compliance, productivity solutions. And as you can see on the top of the screen, we have a bit of a pedigree just through our mutual and then our shared history of serving some of the country's most security conscious organizations. Healthcare is a big vertical for us. It's where we cut our teeth on the Zix side, and over 40% of US healthcare providers, as an example, use Zix for some of their email encryption and email security products. Finance is another large vertical. And now we're really branching out because, as you all know, security and compliance affects all forms of organizations. So let's hop right into it. Let's try to navigate the whole transformation going on with digital business and how does this affect security and compliance. And the reality, and I think you'll see very quickly in one of my upcoming slides, the reality more than ever is that digital is changing the face of business, right? If we take a simple example of Uber, right? They're an organization that they don't really provide a new service, right? They provide a taxi service, a cab service to get someone from point A to point B. Well, that's been around for centuries, if not longer, right? So Uber is not bringing a new product to market. They're bringing a new business model really shaped on digital, on mobile technologies, on cloud. And through leveraging digital technologies, they're transforming the consumer experience. And they're grabbing market share from traditional, in this case, traditional taxi or cab service vendors. Airbnb, same example, right? They're using digital platforms to attract clients and offer a better experience to view properties, to book properties, to provide reviews on properties. And there's countless examples. It's not just like Uber and Netflix and PayPal. Domino's Pizza. So when I heard this story, is incredible. Over the past 10 years, they have risen to become the #1 provider of, well, pizza or restaurants, pizza type restaurant chains in the world. And they did that through digital transformation. The message from our friend here from Accenture is that organizations that do not embrace digital, they risk disappearing. Over half of the Fortune 500 companies have had to move on because they didn't embrace digital technology. And the bottom line is that digital improves business outcomes. If you're a technology provider like Zix, it allows us to get our products to market faster, to have a broader customer reach. If you're a healthcare provider, you can increase patient care through embracing digital technologies. You can communicate with your patients and your clients more effectively through patient portals, right? And the list goes on, from supply chains to education to providing energy and technology, and even providing better employee services for your own or within your own organization, right? So digital helps to improve service. It can lower your operating costs and hopefully grab more market share so that you can grow your specific business. And undoubtedly, the pandemic that's upon us has really accelerated the future of work or digital transformation by 7 years. I apologize, I can't remember where the quote is from. I think it was Accenture, but I'm not positive. And the reality is that, when you think of the pandemic and when it hit in March and April, and I'll use one example just to contrast. You think of healthcare organizations. They had to respond on a dime, right? And they had to start providing patient care, but something else happened, right? Technology companies like AppRiver, like BRITECITY, right? We had to respond. We became the digital first responders in the pandemic to help organizations pivot and change and accelerate their digital transformation. And there's this tension that goes on. So for all the benefits that I've covered on digital transformation, right? If you think of the left-hand side of the screen, right? We can better digitally connect with customers. We can collaborate. We can empower employees. Well, there's also these critical considerations. I've listed them in the defense column, right? So with the digital economy, we're fueling this explosion of data. And the challenge is much of that data can be personal data. It can be confidential. It can be covered by regulatory law. It can be, it can ruin a business if that personal or sensitive data is breached or compromised, right? And almost 80% of leaders, 79% of leaders say that introducing a new business model invariably introduces technical vulnerabilities, right? So there's this tension, like, do I advance my digital business? What about digital risk and so on and so forth? And what about compliance? So there's this ongoing tension that's occurring, and it affects all industries, right? I mentioned at the beginning, AppRiver and Zix, when it came to security and compliance, we cut our teeth on healthcare and finance. Those were heavily regulated industries, but that's changing, right? So in California, we now have the California Consumer Protection Act, right? And it's all around how every organization that does business in the state of California has a role and must comply with protecting digital information, right? Private information about their customers and so on and so forth. And that is spanning or expanding, I guess, to states across the country. I think there's 13 states now that are starting to implement similar laws, data privacy laws to CCPA. And we have others. We have, payment card industry, we have FERPA and education, but there's also laws around data retention. So for example, FINRA, sorry about all the acronyms, FINRA is a financial regulatory body, and they say basically you must retain communications between you and your clients when it comes to dealing in securities. And that's not just email communications. If you're dealing or communicating with clients on social media, on instant messaging, on texting, you need to retain all of that data and maintain it in a bulletproof archive, so to speak. And so data retention comes into play in all types of organizations, especially when you start talking about litigation or maybe human resources issues, right? Code of conduct violations. Well, are you archiving communications between your employees? And so there's a whole range of compliance factors, both internal and external, that organizations need to consider. And they're only increasing, right? So Gartner is predicting that in the next 3 years, by 2023, 2/3 of the world population will be covered by privacy regulations. I already mentioned CCPA, 13 states are starting following those laws. The scary part is that many organizations, right, 88%, are unsure they can really detect, discover, and protect sensitive data that may be under these regulations. So there's this real challenge, and it's accelerating because of this digital business. So why invest? Well, there's the argument of you have to, right? If you don't invest, you're going to be fined, right, because of compliance violation, or you're going to be breached. There's the negatives tactics, the stare tactics, and they're real. They cannot be ignored. But we believe another way to look at investing in compliance is around the upside, right? If you invest in compliance, you can build holistic business strength. This is a term that actually came from our chief legal counsel, right? It says, as you govern your organization in a very compliant manner, in a very organized, structured manner, you can be stronger. You can flex your business muscle, right? You can be bold. You can go out and capture new markets because your risk posture is reduced, right? And ultimately, you can increase productivity as well, because a good compliance program will affect your internal operations as well. If employees know the organization is governing the business, is enforcing or monitoring culture and code of conduct, employees will be more free to really be liberal in their ways to promote and advance the organization. Gartner says that organizations that invest in compliance, right, can attract and retain up to 40% more customers, right? So there's an upside to compliance that is worth considering. So how do we approach it? Well, trying to keep it high level, we believe that there's a toolbox, right? There's no silver bullet to anything in life, right? And when we think about compliance, it's more than a toolbox. I call it a workshop, right? You need a variety of tools. You need internal operating procedures, right? You need guidelines. You need to train and equip your employees, right? And then there's a suite of products and technologies that can help out, right? Threat protection products that keep the criminals out of your organization and away from your sensitive data. There's tools around email and data encryption and rights management. Who can see what, right? How do you keep your sensitive data safe while still sharing it with those that need to see it? Your partners, your customers, other employees, right? And then there's archiving products, right? How do we discover and retain data to make it easily discoverable and shareable, to make sure we comply with litigation, with regulatory laws, and with our own corporate culture policies. So that's a quick summary of why compliance and some of the basic building blocks. And what I want to do now is invite Charles to take you through one of those tools. We call it the Microsoft 365 Security Audit Tool, to go a little bit deeper about how you can add layers of security to that particular Microsoft platform to increase your security and compliance posture. So Charles, with that, I think you're on the line, and I will advance your slides as you instruct.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. With the AppRiver, Microsoft 365 Security Audit is going to give you full insight into everything that's going on in your Office 365 tenant. So it is going to be that extra layer on top of not just scanning what's coming inbound and outbound through email or through your networks. This is also going to give you insight into how that content's being handled once it's in your users' mailboxes. So some of the benefits and the granularity that you can actually see in there are broken up into these different sections here. We'll give full reporting on admin roles, what sort of permissions are being given to the admins of your tenant, and how many of those admins exist. We want to make sure that we're using, the least privileges possible when divvying out that, so we don't want global admin users existing out in the wild that aren't being used frequently and things like that. But it will also give you a list of all the users there as well and how they're licensed, so you can even see and make sure no one's being over licensed, that everyone has the appropriate functionality there. But it will even give you insight into how they're accessing their mailboxes. If they have multi-factor authentication enabled, and with everyone working remote today, obviously we want to make sure those endpoints are secure and everyone is signing in from the approved locations. Now, the mailbox reports will also provide some insight into exactly where those users are logging in from as well. So with mailbox auditing enabled, that will give some insight into the actual IP addresses and how those are being accessed as well. So we can see if a mailbox, is being accessed from the Ukraine for some reason, and you only do business in the U.S. and all your employees are based in the U.S. That's going to be a red flag that mailbox may be compromised. Those credentials were stolen at some point. Now someone else is trying to access that mailbox. And Mike, if you want to go on to the next slide there to highlight the benefits of all those reports. A lot of the value is also going to be found in the forwarding reports as well as the inbox rule reports. So those are actually going to give full comprehensive views to your admins on all of the forwarding and inbox rules enabled in the Office 365 tenant, which is a great place to look to detect those compromised mailbox scams. So for a lot of these bad actors, when they compromise a mailbox, they're not going to immediately start sending false messages and things like that. What they'll do is they'll typically set up forwarding rules. They'll set up inbox rules where the sort of messages that they're looking for, things mostly dealing with money being wired around or things of that nature, they're going to set up a rule where that's being moved to a folder in the mailbox that a user typically doesn't check, something like an RSS feed. And then they're going to set up a forwarding rule so that they're getting that content forwarded to them as well. And they want to make sure that users not even aware they're there. So it gives you full insight into exactly how all that content's being handled and who that's being forwarded to, so that you can see where those bad actors are and if they're actively monitoring email in your environment. And those are typically the toughest breaches to detect, since they are so minimal and typically working in the background there, where they're just monitoring things and not taking actual actions. And then, of course, we can schedule these reports to be run on a regular basis as well, so you can be getting this sort of insight on a regular basis, whether that's monthly, quarterly, biannually, however frequently you want us running those. We can be doing that as needed. And then if you move on to the next slide here, Mike, you'll see how that report is actually generated for you. So we do give clear color designations as well into where some points of concern may be. So you can see in the center of the screen there, the users with multi-factor authentication disabled. If there are any inbox rules set up, things being moved and marked as red, or items being set to delete. So we even give you those red icons there to tell you where those points of concerns are. But then when you move on to the next slide here and actually see the granularity of the reports themselves, we're going to provide that report to you where you can see those admin and user roles, see exactly what as I said, the email address, the permissions associated with them, if they're using that multi-factor authentication, if that is enabled, which form they're using it in, if it's through an app, is it SMS messaging, when's the last time their password was changed, and is that set to expire, and how you want to be handling those security postures. And then the next slide here shows those actual inbox rules and where you can actually start going through there and seeing who has the insight into things in certain people's mailboxes. There's even cases where there may be things being forwarded internally that you're not aware of, and maybe someone in the organization is monitoring a mailbox they shouldn't. There's those sort of uncomfortable situations that occur as well, but it'll give your admins and your security team a full insight into exactly how all those mail items are being handled once they're delivered to the mailboxes.
All right. Well, what's fantastic and really what a lot of today's webinar was focused around is some of the things that BRITECITY is doing alongside AppRiver and Zix to kind of get in front of that compliance, some of those compliance requirements that are very complicated for small to medium businesses who are just busy trying to make their business work, let alone watch and monitor many of the aspects of security, cybersecurity, and kind of the regulations around compliance. So those of you who are on this call who are leveraging BRITECITY services, this report is actually something that we are running on your behalf in the background. We are only able to run something like this because of our partnership with AppRiver Zix. And everyone who's on this call, again, that is BRITECITY client, benefits from this level of security that's really difficult for us to kind of showcase unless we find something that's a red flag. So just rest assured and have a bit of comfort that BRITECITY, AppRiver Zix, is taking care of you in some ways far more detailed than some of the competitors out there that you could go get similar services from. So now, Mike, Charles, thanks for just sharing kind of your area of expertise and kind of laying a little bit of a foundation. I'd love to open this up a little bit for any kind of questions that may be waiting out there with the people who have joined. And I actually have one I'm just going to kind of kick things off with. And for those of you who are on the right here on the right-hand side of your screen, you can throw a question up there about anything in the compliance space that you might have a question about. And meanwhile, I'll ask Charles or Mike, either one of you, what are some of the larger issues that you are seeing when you start a relationship with a new firm, with a new partner? Where are the dangers that you see, either clients or partners, kind of that top 10% that's happening way too often? Is there anything in specific that you can share, almost kind of like what to watch out for?
Well, I'll start off, and Charles, maybe you can tack on. But there's a few things that come to mind, right? The things that are top, it's difficult, right? Email security is not a brand new technology, right? So there's a lot of vendors and confusion, and so being able to understand the difference between a run-of-the-mill type of security solution versus one where there's an intelligence team. So very similar to the way Chad talked about BRITECITY, doing things in the background with security audit to help secure your protection, right? You want to make sure that the technology vendors have a cyber intelligence team who are constantly staying ahead of the most recent threats. So when a threat hits out in the marketplace, we discover it first and we put in remediation to block it, right? So understanding how threats, how what they call zero-day attacks are addressed by your vendor is important, because those are the ones that matter, right? Everybody knows about threats after they're 10 days old, 20 days old, 30 days old. I think the other one that's key for me, and it really depends, I mean, and BRITECITY does a great job of this for you, right, is IT can be complex, right? So how can you remove that IT complexity, put it on the shoulders of BRITECITY so that you can focus on your business? If you're dealing with vendors and technologies that are consuming more of your time and giving you headaches around technology, that's a major red flag to me. And that's where you need to offload that to the experts like BRITECITY, like AppRiver, and allow you to focus on building your business, right? Transforming your business and allowing it to grow. Anything to add, Charles, or?
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head there, Mike. The only thing I was going to add is kind of what you were touching on at that last point, which is just how important it is to find a solution like what Zix and AppRiver offers, where we're going to offload a lot of that burden from the IT staff of the customer and free up their team, because they're going to be more positioned to know how to grow the business internally through that IT department. So we think it's more valuable for them to put their mind towards that than curating filters and policies and things like that. Put that on the human element in our support staff.
Are there any more questions, Chad, or?
Sorry about that. I was on mute there, trying to let you guys talk, and I jumped in to say something, and I was muted. So my apologies.
Yeah.
No, so, on the topic of compliance, there are two services that I'm thinking of that we have access to through AppRiver Zix, which is the Information Archive and the Zix email encryption. Can you spend a little bit of time just educating us? How again, through the lens of compliance, how are those two services being used through the other partnerships that you have and people out there?
Sure. So again, Charles, if you don't mind, I'll start and we'll save the best answer for last. So email encryption is a tricky one, right? So a lot of solutions, encrypting the email itself, right? The technology of applying encryption is not difficult, right? It's knowing when to encrypt, right? So does a particular email require encryption? Does it include sensitive data, intellectual property, personal information, right? And relying on your end users to do that is onerous. It puts a burden on the end users, right? Should I encrypt this? Shouldn't I? But all those type of things. And maybe they forget. I forget. We all forget, right? And maybe they don't know. And so making email encryption automatic and simple, right? And when you're dealing things with large files, right? Like, I've got to share this file, and it's whatever, 50 megabyte, 25 megabytes. Well, that can't go through email. Do I have a way to share that file in a secure way, right? And so having solutions that make it easy on the end user while you keep your company in compliance is critical, right? Archiving is another one. Archiving traditionally has been an IT function. We'll get the IT department to whatever, right? Run a search on this or that. That's fine, and BRITECITY can help you with that. But you also need your business users, your legal department, your lawyers, your HR folks, to be able to look at compliance tools, be able to look at audit reports, to do their job effectively, to enforce internal compliance. So ensuring that the tools you have are usable by your line of business users when it comes to archiving is top of mind.
Perfect. Couldn't agree more. Charles, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, the only thing I would add is it's also very important to make sure that the different solutions you're going to be using are going to play well together. So, for instance, when you're talking about encryption, most people do know, when to encrypt certain messages, whether it's HIPAA information, financial information, whatever it may be. But if 2 years down the road, when the HIPAA auditor comes knocking, if all you have in your inbox is a notification email and that message expired, 6 months ago in the portal it was residing, and that's not going to complete the full picture for compliance that you want to be painting there for that auditor, so to speak. So the tools like Zix's email encryption were able to decrypt that message automatically at the edge of the network as it comes in, allows the archiving tool to capture all that sensitive information for those compliance reasons, allows you to maintain that compliance while that information's all in transit, but it's still accessible for those auditors and for your users to alleviate any of those pain points that might come up on the back end.
And on the information archive piece, sometimes I find it difficult to explain to my clients, use cases and such, so that of when it's needed. Do you have any real life use cases that you've gotten involved in where having the archive, and specifically the primary one is email archiving? You guys provide way more than just email archiving, but is there any examples of here's how it saved someone or rescued or the situation at all?
Sure, absolutely. There was actually a customer we were working with about 2 weeks ago where they had actually had some turnover with their IT team, with one of their top IT admins there. And when they let them go, unfortunately, they forgot to decommission all of his credentials. So he was actually still accessing some of the systems and doing some shadow IT work, trying to see who they were trying to hire to replace him and things like that. And part of the archive includes the full audit log over every message that a user's accessing, and it records the date and time the user comes in to view that content. So we're helping them and working with the actual forensic lawyers they're bringing in to investigate the matter, where they can actually now trace all the messages that he was able to view in the interface there, since it's timestamping his credentials there when he's accessing any of that information. So they have a clear picture of exactly what he was looking at and when.
Wow, that's scary, especially being the one, sitting here on the IT side of things. So that kind of freaks me out a little bit. So, well, I think both email encryption, but especially in the small to medium sized business space, email encryption is a newer product, a newer service that really, many firms haven't had to really invest in. I think the new compliance requirements, Mike, you talked about 18 states out of the 50 that have these new, CCPA type things that are happening here in California now, sweeping across the nation. Having that email encryption option and even the automation to auto encrypt when the situation requires, even if the user sending the message is not aware that it needs to be encrypted. I think that's just, continuing. We're trying to educate more and more and more. We've done a couple of these webinars now with AppRiver Zix to just try and help our clients understand, the use cases. And I've heard it said that we need to be told something 7 times before we actually have the, oh, now I get it kind of moment. So the repetition is many times good. And then also on the information archive side, I've had architectural firms for years invest in online archiving because they can get sued for up to 10 years after new development or something like that. And so they need to keep email traffic inbound and outbound for insurance purposes. It's a requirement. But now that kind of that level of archiving is seeping its way into every SNMB business across the US. So it's amazing to kind of see this change in the landscape. But I want to kind of just wrap things up at this point in time and open up for any closing thoughts you might have. You don't have to have any. I really appreciated you both jumping in here and standing in for Mr. Sheridan, and that it's been great to meet you both and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, good, very good. Thank you, Chad, for having us. No last thoughts. I'll throw one for about 10 seconds. So we talked about email encryption. When you think about email, somebody has to receive that email, right? And so it's one thing if your employees figure out how to send an encrypted email or you automate it. But the second half of the equation is the person you're sending that to, your customer or your partner or whoever you're sending it. Is it going to be very difficult for them to open that encrypted email, right? So thinking about the delivery and the ability for the recipient to open and access and even reply to that message in a secure fashion. And so a lot of considerations. The good news is that BRITECITY has your back to make sure that your implementations can take care of those kind of considerations. So that's my last thought.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap things up for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you are interested in the 365 security report that we are running on your behalf, and you want to just get more info from us or understand that a little bit more, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have questions about email encryption and you want to inquire about turning that service on for your firm or the information archive piece and learning more about that, again, please don't hesitate. For those of you who are BRITECITY clients, help@britecity.com is a great place to start, just to throw that question out there, and we'll make sure it gets routed to the right person. So thank you all. Thank you, Charles and Mike. Appreciate it again, your time, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Sounds good. Have a great night, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.